Welcome to Brief History Conspiracy.
This week, the destruction of the Twin Towers, performing some kind of renovations, maintenance,
Well, the official
installing explosives.
The official story is that they were the official story is they were fireproofing the lift shafts. I would argue they didn't do a very good job. The other thing I was thinking about as well is that as these floors are collapsing, whether it's demolition or not, again, you're going to have a lot of air being pushed down very suddenly. I think that would, any weakness in any of the glass or anything, that would blow windows out and things as it was going down. If you're new to our channel, please like and subscribe. It really does help us out. There is one other thing to say though, that even though aluminium melts at 600 degrees, there was a theory put forward a few years ago, basically, that when the plane went into the tower, the material then would have fallen above, and when it started burning, but it would have basically, the material would have fallen on top and kind of stifled the initial fire.
Yes.
But it would have basically created a like a blast furnace, so it would have allowed the fire potentially to get much hotter. And once you get to around 2,500 degrees, which seems a lot, but there are some records that say that the fire possibly could have got in areas up to this sort of temperature.
Okay.
Aluminium burns. And when aluminium burns, it's not nice. It's really very quite dramatic.
But we were seeing molten metal, which is only liquid metal. We weren't. So what you're saying is it burns at 2,500, turns into a gaseous state at that.
And then it could have melted the steel. And then we would see iron, because of a chemical reaction,
right,
the steel would
okay,
start breaking down potentially. You'd have liquid steel, liquid iron, liquid... It's a theory, but it's not one backed up by the evidence very well. Because
no, it's interesting.
When aluminium burns, it burns very bright. It's like magnesium burning. And we don't see that. So, but when we start talking about thermite and some of the evidence that was left behind in the dust and things like this, I have to start wondering, when there's aluminium, and again, in the military they built aluminium armoured personnel carriers.
Oh yes, yeah, you mentioned this. Yeah.
And when they get hit by anything heavy, the aluminium burns and it just sprays inside the cabin and it becomes like a battery box, and it's really horrific.
Yeah. Aluminium
burning is not nice, but also it creates lots of chemical reactions and weird things start going on. So it's worth considering.
Yeah, definitely worth considering. That it could have caused the temperature, and with those kind of temperatures, you then have more of an argument for the structural steel in the building losing its strength and rigidity, and perhaps even melting in parts. So then you do obviously give more credence to the official theory of the destruction rather than it being controlled demolition.
More evidence for it, really. And also, the problem is, it was quite an unusual. It would be quite an unusual event, even though physically possible for the airplane to go in. But we'd have to then argue it happened twice, which is potentially. I mean, if that's just the way things happen. But the argument is kind of that it's slightly unusual that it would have had to have collapsed in a certain way and this sort of thing. But it happened both times.
Yeah, and they both hit different points of the building, didn't they? As well. I'm trying to think what the floors.
North
the impact
face. WTC1 hit the north face at between 99 and 93.
Yes.
Stories, and WTC2
was a lot lower, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was like
77 and 85.
Was it 77 and 85 it hit?
Yeah, so a fair bit lower. And that was obviously the one that collapsed quicker. The one that was lower. Maybe because there's more weight above the damage.
That would make more sense in the blast furnace theory, because you'd have more of the building above falling in onto the fire from the plane and the jet fuel, creating this compression and creating this sort of blast furnace within the building. So if that one went first, that does actually make sense then, because it was lower down, so there's more material above to help the blast furnace get hotter quicker,
burn through. Like I said though, I just wish there was more evidence for it, but there isn't. It's a theory, but there's very little evidence to back it up.
It's a better theory than a lot of the official theories I've heard.
The official NIST theory for why it collapsed is basically that it's quite an unusual. You've got the core strength, and then you've got the outer structure steel, and then you've got floor sections that span across the two, and these are quite wide. They're quite unusual for this type of building. They're quite large floor spans.
Okay.
Basically, the steel was distorting like mad because the fires on the inside was much hotter than the fire on the outside.
Right.
Which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah.
But about 150 degrees. So these long spans of steel that were supporting the floor on the inside were distorting more because as they get hotter they expand.
Yep.
But on the outside they weren't distorting as much. So there was this internal collapse when the angle clip joints that connected these floor spans failed and the floor collapsed. That then...
And this is the official pancake collapse
then
theory.
you have that pancake effect, and then once you get to enough energy, it just goes.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. So that their argument why perhaps you see at the top of the building at the start of the destruction the
leaning,
the leaning, but not so much the leaning, more just like as one floor collapses onto the next, then that floor collapses onto the next. You're seeing the horizontal ejections coming out before there's so much weight that it then just goes.
Yeah, it gets to a point where there's energy and it just goes. Yeah,
right.
That's the official version of events, and I can follow that. I can agree with that.
Yeah, okay. To some extent, I think it's plausible.
But that means this building was very badly
designed. Yeah.
The other thing is the fireproofing on this. The fireproofing normally for a steel structured building is basically that the steel is encased in concrete or encased in something. In this building, it's not. It's painted on. So when the plane hit, a lot of that fireproofing might have actually been shredded off anyway. But it is important to say that only three... we've argued this before, that 3 buildings have been lost to fire. Steel-framed buildings with fireproofing have been lost to fire ever.
Yes.
And it was on September
11th, 2001, all 3.
Yeah, I would argue that 1 building has been lost to fire. 2 buildings have been lost to a big plane hitting them and then a fire. And I think that is that plane hitting that building weakened sections of it. Even though the official reports have said it should have been able to stand, and then the fire finished it off. The Building 7, which we're again not mentioning it, but we're with a commission report today. We're not mentioning Building 7. That is the only building that's having steel frame building that's been lost to fire.
Yes, in the history of the world. Wow, in our recorded history, going back what?
Oh, go back to Series 1 where we say
6,000 years, maybe.
They built one in Atlantis that was lost to steel.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe
back
they
to Series 1 we discussed that. If we talk about the design of the building then, right? This obviously it was designed in the 60s and 70s, built in the 80s. It had been standing for 20 something years.
Yes. And designed to withstand impact from a passenger plane.
Apparently they'd argue that it was built into the structure. And to be fair, it did survive
the initial
plane
impact.
hitting it.
Yeah, it did. They both did. Yeah, true.
For 56 minutes and 102 minutes. It survived. The design seems to be a big factor on why this building potentially fell.
If we're looking to go down the lines of the official theory, I totally agree. The design of the building. So maybe they didn't want to admit how poor a design the initial design was for a building in such a high rise 110-story building in the biggest metropolitan area in America probably.
Maybe considering the political situation post 9/11 thing, that they just didn't want to stand up and go,
it'd be more the government.
This just wasn't a very good building.
It'd be the people suing the government and bankrupting the government would probably be the real issue.
That safety standards weren't high enough.
Yeah, and that they'd lost this person, that this person was injured, and this person can't walk for the rest of their lives. And so then suddenly you're getting multi-million-pound compensation claims in from a lot of people.
Yeah, well, there was nearly 3,000 deaths on the day and another 10,000 injuries.
There you go.
Of different things. So there's a lot of people that, and then you get sued for emotional scarring. I was watching
exactly, and then you think about how many sort of members of the family will take it. Will it just be immediate family, or will the extended family also put in a claim? And then suddenly you can take that 13,000 people killed or injured and multiply it by 10, and you might get 130,000 people claiming. Yeah. And they're all claiming millions of pounds.
So we argue then that it was designed to take a hit.
Yeah, right? Well, that's what we were told. Yes.
But then. I mean,
or what we've been told, yeah.
And this sort of thing has happened before. We've had lots of buildings burn for 17, 18, 19 hours and stand. Everything else is burned away, the metal frames. We've even had incidents of planes hitting buildings.
Oh,
and
yeah,
them
you
surviving.
found out about that one, didn't you? Was it the
Yeah.
Empire State?
The Empire State Building was hit by a B-52. I remember this story from years ago, and I thought it was a little plane that had hit it because there was so little damage. So I thought it was a little, like,
Cessna.
you know, yeah, like a little biplane or something. And it was in 1945, so I was thinking,
Yeah, I'm guessing it didn't have a payload on when it hit. But
I hope not, no.
there'd have been a lot more damage, I would have
It
thought.
did
but-
hit it a lot slower. It hit it about 200 mile an hour. The aircraft that hit the Twin Towers were somewhere around 450 miles an hour, and would have been bigger aircraft, but not. So after the collapse, there was still. I mean, we're talking. There was heat remnants in the foundations for months afterwards that nobody seems to be able to explain.
In fact, there were even what was the word? There were even witness statements that said that there was molten pools of molten metal still there in the debris.
Which again, a lot of them were
later,
found to
when
be
they were-
iron, which no one can explain. And that isn't necessarily like a conspiracy theory. There is molten pools of iron. And the only thing I think of is, well, this steel is iron, partly iron. So when it melted, it broke down or whatever. But even that doesn't make sense because they were saying that it wasn't hot enough for the steel to melt. So,
yes.
But you can see videos of them dragging girders and things out of the ground, and they just combust as soon as they hit the air. There was temperatures of 2,000-3,000 degrees. I mean, you can imagine the impact of that going into the ground and the friction and the heat generated. But for months, for like 2 to 3 months.
It doesn't seem right, does it? It doesn't sit very well. No, it
seems crazy.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then when they did start pulling the steel out of the ground, this should have been a crime scene.
Yes.
There was a crime scene.
Yep.
But it was never cordoned off. It was never done anything. They dragged the metal out of the funk. They checked for bodies, basically. They were checking for things. And they shipped it immediately out to a hangar just outside New York. And then the steel was sold
Exported.
for recycling.
Yeah,
all
to
over
India,
the world.
China, predominantly China, I believe. But
Yeah, 175,000 tonnes of steel was sold for recycling.
But you China lapped that up at a cheap price, didn't they, as well? I would
Well,
imagine.
You should like, where's this metal come from? I don't know. It's not come from 9/11, has it? No.
No.
Because we want full price for it. You wouldn't pay. I'm not sure about this. But a lot of the steel was actually, and a lot of parts of the building was actually saved. And then, like, every state in America had a piece of it as like a memorial. But that wasn't done until nearly 10 years after. It was like 2011 when they started doing this. They had plenty of time to check there was no evidence on that steel. Or before it was, is this bit clean? No, we'll send that to China. Is this bit, no, that's got a bit of bomb on it. We'll send that to India.
This one's got a 45-degree cut for a steel girder.
Yeah,
we won't send that bit.
Yeah, we'll put that on a boat and send it to somewhere else. There weren't the checks. This was a crime scene.
Yes.
It should have been treated like a crime scene.
Yes.
And it wasn't. They dug it up and they got it out.
Yes. And coincidentally, there were two companies used, AMEC and Bond Lovis, I think. And each one of them removed or cleared up one of the towers.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, I think it was AMEC had just recently done the recent renovation of the outer E-ring of the Pentagon, which was hit by the other plane.
No, that's not the same company.
Yes,
I haven't done the Pentagon research yet, so I'm going to double check that.
No, it's the same company.
Oh, Christ.
Yes. Oh, and I also believe that one of those two companies were also responsible for some of the construction crews that were going in at night to the Twin Towers to perform these maintenance operations.
So they know what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So that adds some serious weight to the demolition side of things. When you use the same companies to clean up that you use to set it up.
Right, so there's a couple of other little conspiracies that go around, but also a couple of points that make you wonder whether it was a planned demolition. For one, the buildings weren't up to code, and they hadn't been up to code for a long time.
Yes.
There was a loan to remove the asbestos from the buildings was going to cost £1 billion.
So there was some significant renovation costs that were very imminently rearing their heads.
It's also been pointed out that cancer rates in New York in this area have gone through the roof since 9/11, and that might have something to do with the massive cloud contaminated with asbestos that filled the entire city.
Possibly. I'm surprised there haven't been a lot of people suing in New York, the government, because of that.
They got to connect the two, don't they?
Who was it that did it recently? Somebody did it recently, didn't they? They managed to sue Monsanto for genetically modified crops that have caused cancer, and he successfully sued Monsanto.
Doing anything against Monsanto is
I know.
impressive.
That's what I was mentioning.
I think probably like all of the lawyers work for them, don't they?
Yeah, but I'm sure I read that recently. Someone managed to successfully sue Monsanto. So the tides are changing, people.
There's a famous photo where they call it like the dust girl, and there's is the woman completely head to toe covered in dust. She died of stomach cancer a few years ago. That's quite an iconic photo. So yeah, I mean, we've all seen it when they'll come to do repairs on your house. Because where we live, we had a big explosion of houses in the 60s, and they did use a lot of asbestos. So now, whenever they do any work, they have to come, big masks, full fed gas. They have to hoover because asbestos in the air will give you cancer. And like I said, the island was full of it.
Okay.
But that was just one part of the renovations that were going to need to be done.
Yes.
The rumours were that either within 25 years they were going to have to spend billions refurbing these buildings or tear them down.
So in that case, if you were Larry Silverstein, why the hell would you sign a 99-year lease on buildings 6 weeks prior to the destruction of the towers that then requires billions of pounds worth of renovation within the short-term future? You're surely going to be significantly out of pocket once those renovations are required.
He sued for compensation from a couple of other places as well, but and he basically amassed about 13 billion in the end.
Didn't realise it was quite that high a figure. I knew it was in the billions, but I didn't realise. And I knew that he'd managed to orchestrate it as 2 separate terror attacks to claim twice.
The little tinker.
Yeah, I think you're right with 93. I don't know why I had 95, but I think you're right with 93.
I'm going to go, because on our last video, you know, I said Operation Mongoose instead of Operation Mogul. I'm going with I got the M right, so I'm taking a whole victory.
Right, okay.
Still got it. So.